word gets back around. And I kind of feel like I was sitting into that lesson, because we are people that has been molded by God. God is the pottery, and as long as that clay is still moving, that clay is still moldable. But once that clay stops being moving, it gets hard. So you can't teach a hard-headed person nothing. So I do appreciate how well I've heard that lesson was taught. 'Cause I kind of wish I was sitting in on it, but I did hear that lesson was taught pretty well, and what I've gotten out of that lesson, it was amazing. So we thank God for that. Thank God for being back. I did have a good time. I enjoyed myself. I really did. I enjoyed myself. It's a good thing when husband and wife can actually go out and enjoy each other, because God gave each other. So it's a good thing that you can go out and enjoy each other. And I do thank God for that. So we're going to go ahead and get into the lesson. We are talking of Paul. We are in the book of Acts, and the book of Acts, as I've been explained, the book of Acts is the book of Acts, things that was done. So we are talking of Paul, Priscilla, Aquila, and Apollo. Now, these were people that didn't know each other at first, but then they grew to know each other. They found that they were, in the same craft. They did some of the same things, just like most of us. We might not have the same job title, but we do the same things. We all are followers of Christ. And regardless of what you call your religion or your denomination, we are still under the same craft. We are still heading towards the same direction. We're still uplifting the same person. So we are still talking about God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So understanding that that's who we're talking about, we are under the same craft. So that being said, we just go on and get on into this lesson. But before I get into the lesson, let's just say question. I don't want an answer. Just want you to ask yourself this question. Why are you where you are today? That's the only question. And that's a question I want you to ask yourself, not just today, but every day. Why are you where you are? Going into this lesson, you find that Priscilla and Aquila they did not end up where they originally planned on being. Because that was not in God's plan. And the funny thing about that, if you want to tell God a joke, tell him your plans. Because God has his own plans for you. Because that's the funniest thing he can hear. That's the funniest thing he can hear is you telling him what your plans are. So now me personally, I can tell you I am not where I planned on being 20 years ago. 30 years ago. When I was in school, my plans were, and my mother can tell you, my plans were to be an architect. I used to walk around all day long drawing and sketching this and sketching that, trying to figure out how this building is made. I wanted to be an architect when I was born. So when I was coming up, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to be an architect. But as time went on, I got into baseball, and I wanted to be like Bo Jackson, So I wanted to go to the major leagues and play baseball just like Bo Jackson. But then I got into high school and I stopped playing baseball and started running track. So then my plans was, maybe I go to the Olympics and throw the discus, because I was pretty good at it. I took the state record and everything. I wanted to throw the discus in the Olympics. But then something else got on me, and I was like, I don't even like school anymore, so So that kind of went out the window. So what am I going to do now? I know I couldn't sit home. So, everybody was telling, my brother was telling me, so, hey, go to college, man. You go to college, we going to have some fun. I come home on leave, y'all got parties, you invite me, and, we gonna do our thing, but no, I ain't going back to school. I don't like school. So I joined the military, and, I wanted to make it a career. I said, well, 20 years ain't nothing. I could do 20 years. It ain't nothing. I went through basic training. I did the first 2 years, and, it was chaotic. I was getting in a whole lot of trouble. Not major trouble, but when it comes to the military, anything that you do is major. I'm getting to work a minute late every day. I'm a minute late every day. 7:30, I'm supposed to be there. 7:31 is when I walk through the door. So that's a problem for them. So I'm getting into major trouble, and then I start going through certain things and meet this other guy there. He was a master sergeant. He was a pararescueman. So I'm talking to him. I'm working with him. I'm dealing with him. And, he's kind of carrying me on. So I'm doing good. And I end up going over my last year. I went over and, war done broke out. So I'm over there with them. And, the war done got everybody chaotic. So we over there 6 months, no relief. So when we get back, the commander I don't recommend re-enlistment. So me thinking I'm going to do 20 years. The commander's, no, we don't recommend y'all to re-enlist. Anybody that's coming out now, we don't recommend re-enlistment. So here I am out of the military now, thinking I'm going to do 20 years, but I'm out the military. And, my plans was to retire from the military, but God says no. So I end up getting out and get this job last. It was a great job, $25 an hour, great job. I just got married. I'm 25 years old, married, daughter. We living good. And job closed. Plant shut down. So what am I going to do now? So here I am looking for work, can't find work. 2 years go by, can't find work. But good thing God created a man out of me. So God made a way, and, God's plans was not for me to just sit down and do nothing. God's plan was, you a man, you go and do manly things. You take care of your family, do what you got to do by any means necessary, as Malcolm X would say, by any means necessary. So that's what I did. So where I planned on being is not where I ended up being. I never planned on being in a church. I never planned on things like that. I was one that when Daddy say, hey, get up, it's time to go to church. Oh my God, again. That was me. My plans was not to go to church. When I get out of Mom and Daddy's house, I'm not going to church. That was my plan. Daddy gone. I don't mean the church. Because God's plans are, that's where you're going to be. And see, you can't outdo God's plan. If God has a plan for you to do that, that's exactly what you're going to do. Yeah. Now, in this lesson here, we don't know what Priscilla's background really is. But we do know that Aquila was a Jew. We do know that. Now, whether Priscilla married into the Jews' family or was she a Jew, I mean, at least I haven't gotten that far to find out yet. I don't really know. I was looking for it, but I couldn't find it. I don't know if she was a Jew, but I do know that by laws, all Jews was deported, and she was one of them, along with her husband. So that's why I say it could be the fact that she was married to a Jew, and they just had to get him out of there, So anyway, they did not end up where they planned on being. And this whole journey is not about their plans, but they're going to keep running into different things because God had a plan on top of this plan, on top of that plan. So anything that goes on in your life, best believe that it is planned by God. We ask God for a lot of things. God, if you do this for me, I promise you I will never do this again. We do stuff like that. God, if you allow me to make it through this day, I promise you this is what's going to happen. But see, that word if That's like what I was talking about before. You can have faith and still have doubt. No, that word if, that is having faith but still having doubt. Because you're not really believing that God can do what you believe he can do. You know he can do it, but you don't believe he'll do it for you at this time. So we say if, and God is the only one that can really use that word if. And he will say, if you follow my command, then these are the things that you will receive. Because God never talks to us as it might happen. God always talks to us as it will happen. Not a possibility, but it is. And we talk to him as might, maybe, if, so, I don't know, I think so. That's how we talk to God. So I'm going to go on and get into the lesson because I can just sit and talk. But that's not what this lesson is about. It's not about just sitting and talking. So it starts out, chapter 18, verse 1. It says, after these things, Paul departed from Athens and came to Corinth, and found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately came from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome, and came unto them. And because he was of the same craft, he abode with them and wrought, for by their occupation they were tent makers. And he reasoned in the synagogue every Sabbath, and persuaded the Jews and the Greeks. So that's the first 4 verses. And I did that because it is broken down in 3 parts. So I'm not just going to jump around like that, but I am going to section this thing off because it's sectioned off for a reason and for a purpose. So after these things, after what things? We are in the first verse, and the first verse starts out after these things. After what things? We know that Paul has been going through some stuff. We know at this point here, Paul should have been doing something with Barnabas, but they didn't agree on what was going on at this certain time because, as they planned on doing certain things together, God had other plans. And one might say, well, Paul didn't want to go because, Barnabas was taking his cousin, which he didn't agree with because, it was like a family thing going on. But I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say it was God's plan. Because whether Paul liked him or not, if God planned on it to go that way, that's the way it would have gone. You can't change God's mind, but God can change your direction. So after they've been having a lot of disputes when it came to Paul. A lot of disputes. People didn't agree on the things that Paul was doing because of who Paul was. They understand that Paul used to be one of them that persecuted them. So because you got somebody here now that's acting like they are for you, that once used to be against you, so they like, is this a setup? Is he trying to set us up or something? So they didn't really trust him. All because of who he used to be. Y'all can find that a lot these days. People don't trust you based on who you used to be. I know there's a lot of people probably don't trust me today because of who I used to be. But I'm not that way anymore. I can say I'm not that way anymore. But, people don't see that. And the only way people would know that you've changed is they would have to be with you day to day. But when you trust and believe in God, you don't judge people on their yesterdays. You judge people on their todays, who they are now. And we discuss things about, God is for us. And because God is for us, nothing can be against us. So if we go by that saying, we have no enemies. Anybody we run across is friendly, or some people might say frenemies, but we are supposed to be good with everybody because everybody was created by God, and nobody is a problem for anybody that has been created for God, because God will not let anybody hurt or harm any of his creations. Now, Paul departed from Athens and went to Corinth because people did not listen to everything that he was saying. They didn't want to agree with everything he was saying. And if you get down a little in between the verse 4 and the verse 18, you'll find that Paul said something along the lines of, you know what, I'm done talking. This is now on your heads. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. I'm going to go and talk to somebody that's actually going to listen. In other words, that's basically what he said. He says, look, I'm done talking. Y'all not listening to me. So I'm going to go and I'm going to share this information with somebody that's actually going to listen. And, it's a thing about trying to get information across to people that doesn't know. If you already know, it's hard for me to tell you anything different. We on Priscilla and Aquila. Now, they were the dynamic duo, Christian couple. They both love God. They both preach God. They both teach God. They both walked hand in hand together, doing God's work together. Powerful couple. As me and Deke was talking earlier this morning, they kind of sound more like Minister Sprine and Prophetess Sprine. I said, you know what? You're right. Hey, this is a powerful couple. Powerful couple. And it's a good thing when you can find a husband and wife that is on the same page.
That's right.
I'm not saying they're going to agree on everything, but they are on the same page. They're both on God's side. They're both walking with God. They're both teaching God. They're both preaching God. And just like this powerful couple, I'm going to also step a little further out there and say they're also like Apollos. Because after we get down a little further, you'll find that Apollos, when he talked boldly. Yeah. He talked brave. He talked like he knew what he was talking about. He stood on business. Whatever he believed is what he stood on, and that's what he said. Nobody was going to change his mind based on what he had said, because that's what he believed. And he talked what he believed to everybody. The problem that Apollos had was the only teachings that he really knew about was John. Yeah. That was it. And and as my father used to teach me, he says, son, there's nothing wrong with listening to everybody. He says, take it all in, but only believe the truth. Listen to everything that people got to say, but only take in the truth. And this powerful couple went to Apollo and they explained it to him. We got to help him out because he is a powerful speaker. He's a powerful man of God, but there's some things that he is missing. I'm not going to change who he is, but I'm going to give him something extra. They're going to give him what they know, because from what they know is he don't know it all. He know a lot, but there's a lot of things that he is missing. And see, that's how we're supposed to be as Christians. We're not supposed to tear anybody down. We're made to build each other up. Right. So while you're hearing somebody talking, and when they are speaking and ministering, and you're looking at them and they're talking boldly and just outright, and nothing can stop them, if you hear something that you disagree with, the one thing that God do not like is for you to say, hey, that's wrong. God says, if it's wrong in your knowledge, pull them to the side. Talk to them one-on-one. Yeah. And see, that's what they did for him. They didn't stop him in the middle of his sermons. They hold up, we gonna talk together, one-on-one, just us. And see, that's how we build each other. We build each other up by making sure that everybody keep their dignity. You don't ever want to break anybody's dignity, because when somebody is out there thinking and feeling like they are doing God's will, the worst thing that you can do is make them think that they have been messing up the whole time. So let them continue to do these things, and then if there's anything that you disagree with, now the one thing about the disagreement is y'all just don't agree on the same thing at the time. That's what a disagreement is. And a lot of arguments is based on, I'm just agreeing to disagree with you. That's what an argument is. So if you're looking at this person and they're saying something that you disagree with, okay, that's what they believe. You got what you believe. Now y'all go and sit down somewhere and talk. And you understand why they believe that, and let them understand why you believe this. And I guarantee you might find and understand that the reason they believe certain things is because they might have saw themselves in the situation. So it says, and he found a certain Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, lately come from Italy with his wife Priscilla, because that Claudius had commanded all Jews to depart from Rome and come unto them. And because he was of the same craft, he abode with them and wrought, for by their occupation they were tent makers. Now, a tent maker. These are literally exactly what it says. It's a tent maker for bypassers, people coming through, in and out of the town, in and out of the area. They are tent makers. They make tents for people. Okay, now, at the same time, a tent maker is also someone that does work to support them outside of their ministries. You know, so, like you have ministers come into the churches, and a lot of them say, you know what? I work for nothing. Don't pay me to do God's will. You know, so they have a job. Now, I've actually heard a lot of ministers say this. Now, they say, you know what? Don't pay me to do God's work. I have a job. God blessed me with a job to support myself and my family. So I'm here doing his will. That's what a lot of them will tell you. You know, so a lot of ministers do not preach for pay. They are tent makers. They have an occupation that God has given them to support their life. And they are doing God's work. That's also a tent maker. And it says that they abode with them and wrought, because their occupation was the same. All of them was the same. They did the same thing. So along those lines of being tent makers, they were also ministering. And just looking at these messages, these few verses, you can think that they all was believers in God. Because in this lesson, you find that Paul, Priscilla, and Aquila, they've been trying to let people understand that Christ and the Messiah was the same person. The whole time, they've been trying to let them understand that Christ is the Messiah. The Messiah is Christ. But many of them that they was talking to, they was believing that Christ is this person, the Messiah is this person. But see, they didn't understand that Christ is the Messiah and the Messiah is Christ. And they had to let them understand that, because if they don't understand that word about Christ and Messiah is the same, then Christ and the Messiah, instead of having one, now you got two. And you got two sides believing in two different things. Just like how we talk and we minister about there is no religion other than God. God is the only religion. So when we start putting Baptist, Holiness, Pentecostal, Methodist, Buddhist, all of this, when we start putting all those different names on a religion, those that has a simple mind, that don't really understand the truth and everything about God, they will start believing that Baptist is the way, Holiness is the way, Pentecostal is the way, Methodist is the way. Because now, instead of looking at it as just being one religion, now they're looking at it as being the only religion. This is the only way that we're supposed to go. And if you're not going this way, then we can't roll with you. And see, we used to consider ourselves as Holiness at one point. And we used to consider ourselves as Pentecostal at one point. And then my father changed it. Somewhere down the line, I can't remember how far down the line it was that he changed it. And the reason he said he changed it is because he don't want anybody to get the impression that they can't come here because we're not on the same page as them. He wants them to understand that as of non-denominational, we bring in all. We have no discrimination. Right. We are all on the same page. We're all striving for the same thing. So we don't put a label on God. People puts a label on God. And we should never put a label on God. We should never put a limit on God. People will ask, if you go back into the lesson, you find at one point Paul was in jail, and man asked him, what do I got to do to be saved? And the true question about that, the true answer is the only thing you really have to do is accept it. That's it, because we are already saved by grace. We're already saved by Christ. We're already saved by God. God already saved us. The only thing that we really have to do is accept it. See, we go and we think that all we do, we got to go and stand in this line and the pastor or the minister got to place his hands on us and, anoint our heads and do all of these things. And once we get done with all of that, we find a lot of people running through the churches. Yes, I'm saved now. Well, that's not what made you saved. If you're saved at this point, then that's only because you believed it and you accepted it. But doing that does not make you saved. What makes you saved is believing that God is the one. God did it. And he's already done it. It just took this long for you to accept it. And Paul, after this, tarried there yet a good while, and then took his leave of the brethren, and sailed thence to Syria, and with him Priscilla and Aquila, having shorn his head in Cenchrea, or however you pronounce that, for he had a vow. And he came to Ephesus and left them there. But he himself entered into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. When they desired him to tarry longer time with them, he consented not, but bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem, but I will return again unto you, if God will. And he sailed from Ephesus. So Paul sat there this whole time. Now I'm gonna tell you, if you'd have read before this, you would find that Paul was going back and forth. Yeah. He was going back and forth with these people because a lot of people, like I said before, they didn't hear him out. They didn't want to listen to him. They didn't want to believe what he was saying. There was a lot of controversy going on because, Paul was speaking certain things that they needed, but a lot of them didn't want to receive it. So at this point here, Paul actually told them what I said earlier. Paul says, you know what, I'm done talking. He says, all of this blood is going to be on your heads. All of this is going to be on you. I'm done talking. I'm going to go and talk to the Gentiles. I'm going to go and talk to somebody that's actually going to listen to me. So Paul was understanding that God did not have a limit for people. All people are God's people. There was no separation when it came to God. All people was God's people. And when God told Paul to bring all of his people together, that's what Paul was actually trying to do. Paul was talking to everybody as if they was all on the same page. Everybody was supposed to come back to Christ. Everybody was supposed to believe that Christ was the Messiah. Everybody was supposed to receive these benefits. But a lot of them didn't want to receive it. A lot of them didn't want to hear it. So Paul did what God asked. Paul presented it. And when it wasn't accepted, Paul left it and moved on. Because that's what God asked us to do. God, don't tarry around trying to make people get what you're trying to feed to them. If you come to my house and you want something to eat, but you don't want what I'm offering you, I'm not going to keep trying to force it down your throat. I'm going to hand it to you and I'm going to leave it there. If you want it, you'll eat it. If you don't, you'll leave it. There you go. Say what you got to say and be done with it. It makes no sense in sitting there trying to make somebody get something that they don't want to receive. It's like people that know everything. If they already know it, they're not going to receive it. You can't teach anybody anything that know it all. And it says here that where I'm at. I just saw it. Okay. Priscilla and Aquila, they having shorn his head in Caesarea, for he had a vow. Now Paul had a vow. I don't know what vow he made. I don't know what the circumstances was, but I do know that he didn't cut his head the whole time. He didn't cut his hair the whole time until he got here, to this point here, because there was a vow that he made, and now this was the time for him to have done it. So he kept his promise. In other words, he kept his promise to God. Some things that a lot of us don't do is keep our promise to God. You know, like those false prayers that we send up and we say, God, if you do this, I promise I won't do this again. But as soon as we get what we asked for, we go right back to doing exactly what we promised God we wasn't going to do. Well, Paul kept his promise. Yeah. But see, understand that Paul was this one person that nobody really wanted to give a second chance to based on who he was. But Paul is keeping his promise to God. And many of us that tries to hold people accountable for their past, we won't even keep our promises to God. Many of us that's sitting up in the churches today won't even keep our promises to God. We'll sit here and we'll tell God, God, I thank you for everything that you've done. God, I give my life to you. God, I never do this. God, I never do that. But we always go back to doing exactly what we told God we would never do. Because that's who we are. We are people that just, we like receiving what we want. When we ask people for certain things, what makes us happy is to receive what we ask for. Same time as by any means necessary. That's how we act. By any means necessary. Whatever we got to do or say or whatever we got to act like to get what we ask for, that's exactly what we're going to do to receive what we ask for. And once we receive it, it's like all of those promises is going out the window. I ain't saying that's for everybody. But the majority of us, that's how we act. We get what we ask for, and then we go back to our old way. Think about it. Back in the days when they was coming from Egypt, they asked God for this and asked God for that. As soon as God delivered, they do good for a little while, and then they go right back to their old ways. And it's still going on today. Yeah. We get what we want, and then we go right back to our old ways. God, I promise you I won't. And then God is looking down at you like, who was you lying to this whole time? I knew you was going to do it anyway, but I just showed you that I'm a man of my word. See, God will never take back anything that he promises us. Everything that we got today is a promise that God has promised us. We're the only ones that's reneging on the promises. God is giving us everything that we're asking him for. Now, it says, verse 20 here. Well, actually, I'm going to go up a little bit. It says, and he came to Ephesus and left them there. But he himself entered into the synagogue and reasoned with the Jews. He reasoned with the Jews. This is Paul again. Now, I'm still talking about Paul now. Yeah. Now, this is the man that nobody wanted to listen to. Nobody wanted to hear out because of his past. You know, his past. But see, Paul reasoned with the Jews. He didn't sit in there and argue. He didn't go back and forth. Paul went in there and he listened to everything they had to say. He said what he had to say. There was no altercation going on. Because Paul was listening to them because he was trying to understand why they feel like they feel. The problem with that is they didn't care what he was saying. But he was listening to them trying to understand why they felt the way they felt. He reasoned with the Jews. Now, that's the reason why he says, you know what, I'm just going to go and talk to the Gentiles, because the Jews just wasn't listening. You know, if you go back through your history, you'll find that it was the Jews that they had most of the issues with. It was the Jews. And the Jews were supposed to have been the believers. The Jews was the believers. The Gentiles was those that was hearing about it, but they didn't really know everything about it. So they came in and they was like, well, I want to know a little more, try to figure out what's going on. The Gentiles was those that we always look down on and overlook because they're not in the same place that we're in. Those were the Gentiles. Yeah. But Paul sat there and he reasoned with the Jews. He tried to get a good understanding with why y'all don't want to listen to y'all own. Why y'all don't want to understand where your own is coming from. You know, this is Jesus telling y'all what to do and y'all don't want to listen to this. But then you got the Gentiles that have no sides. The Gentiles trying to figure out which way to go. And they are more acceptable to sit down and understand what's really going on. Now, the problem with being a Gentile is you're open-minded. And being open-minded, anybody come to you, your mind is empty. You know, they come and start feeding stuff to you. So when we're talking about false prophets or anything like that, you got a Gentile that don't really know much. If us true Christians don't go out there and do our job like we're supposed to do, those open-minded people going to get tainted by the wrong people. See, it's our job to go out there and reach people. If we're not reaching people and we're waiting on people to come to our church before we reach them, then the wrong person is going to reach them before we do. That's right. And I'm going to tell you right now, there's a lot of good sounding information that comes from the wrong people that goes to the wrong ears. Because the devil can make a bad thing sound real good. And when you're a true Christian, I'm going to tell you, being a Christian, everything Christian like is not good. It's not pretty. And you're going to have to go through a lot of things. But the key word about going through things is you're going to be going through it. That's how God got us. God got us going through things. We're not stuck in a situation. We're going through it because there's an ending to it. There's another side to it. That's why we get to go through it. And once you go through it, you learn about everything that you had to go through so that if you had to encounter that again, it won't bother you because you'll know what's on the other side.
Yeah, but we can't go out here and attack people either.
No, ma'am.
Because I have an example. And I went to the flea market, me and my ex-husband the other day, last weekend. And it was this guy out there, he had his little table set up and the whole time. And I guess because he didn't see wedding bands on our faces, he just started yelling fornication. You know anything about fornication? Do you know anything about, and I just really wanted to just go step out of my Jesus and just tell him a little something. But I guess because it's judgment, all you saw was me and a man, no rings on our fingers, and you're thinking that all we doing is fornicating, but you didn't even ask the question, well, is that your husband? And my side, that's just my ex-husband on paper with divorce, but that's still my husband. But you didn't ask no questions. You just went, so how many people did you turn away from God, sitting right there at that table? How many people did you turn away from God if that's all you see? You're not telling me how to come before. You're not telling me about the goodness of God. You're not telling me how to change my life. All you yell because you see a man and a woman together, no rings on their face, you just assume we just lollygag it.
Yeah. Well, if any man judge, he has judged himself. That's all. Because the Bible tells us that no man can judge. Only God. Only God can judge. And I think that's in the book of Corinthians. You know, no man can judge lest they judge themselves. You know, because anytime you point a finger, best believe there's three more coming back at you. Because if you can find fault in somebody, then that only means that there's fault in you. That's the only way wrong knows wrong, because they've already been wrong.
That's right. When I was growing up, my grandma told me, she said about that same type of situation we was in. She said we don't have to say nothing to people about their sins. People know their own sins. She said what our job is as being a woman of God is to preach the word of God. She said the word will convict you.
There you go.
The word convict you. Yeah, the word. You'll sit there, you can't sit still. You be like, oh, within yourself. When that word start coming up, you think that preacher preaching about me. No, they preaching the word of God. And the word will be convicting you.
You're right.
Shame.
You're right.
That's why he said, give me the word and leave it there.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm going to tell you.
He's doing the changing.
That's right.
Look, many times I sit and I hear Minister Spry and Prophet Spry, they start preaching, and I'm like,
She talking about me.
you ain't talking about me.
No, all
Was you with me yesterday? You know, that's how I be like sometimes. But see, I understand that God has a way of getting his point across.
That's right.
He have his way of getting his point across. They're not talking about you directly, but that's God's way of saying, hey, listen, pay attention.
Yeah, you're not supposed to get upset about that because that's just God giving you what He wants you to hear.
I hear a word myself.
Yeah.
That's right. That's what we said last Sunday. If the thing hits you, draw your toes up.
All right, so verse 20, it says, when they desired him to tarry a longer time with them, he consented not. When they asked him to keep on talking, now these were the Gentiles here, those that was actually listening to him.
Yeah.
They was like, hey, I want to hear more. Can you give us a little more of that? You know, in other words, we the congregation sitting here listening to Minister Spry, Prophet Spry. They up there preaching. And when they get done with their sermon, we say, no, give us a little bit more of that. Now, the right thing for them to do is do what God says. If God says that's it, that's it.
That's it.
If God says, no, I got a little bit more, I don't know why you sitting down, then they supposed to keep on going. So Paul did exactly what God told him to do. God wanted him someplace else. Now, if Paul would have been doing what he wanted to do, Paul probably would have still been sitting there, because if you go back to, I think it was verse 16, I can't really remember what verse it was when he told them that he was done talking to them. But anyway, if Paul was doing what he wanted to do, Paul would have stayed there, because the only thing he really wanted was them people to hear him out. But that wasn't what he wanted. It was God's will. God told him to leave. It was time to go. So by them asking, he says, you know what? No, it's time for me to get going. You know, so where it says it is. All right. Verse 21 says, but bade them farewell, saying, I must by all means keep this feast that cometh in Jerusalem, but I will return again unto you if it's God's will. And he sailed from Ephesus, if it is God's will. He says, no, I must go on, because God wants me to end this right now, because he got someplace else for me to go. Now, once I'm done with that, now I would like to come back. I would love to come back and sit with y'all and talk a little bit more. But if it is not God's will, I'm not coming back. He said, I can't make no promises. I was always taught not to ever make a promise to anybody. Because as I said before, the one thing that will make God laugh is for us to tell him our plans. And see, we can't plan on doing something that is not in God's will. We not God. We don't know what God have planned for us. We can say, I want to do this next week. I would love to do this next week. We even plans on things next year or even 5 years from now. We plan on these things.
Right. Word God said, we make our plans, but God determines what our steps.
Our steps are ordered by the Lord.
Right.
And if that order has not been put in, we won't have that. We can say, I would love to, I would like to, but if it's not his plan, it's not going to happen. And we always say, if it is God's will, if it is God's will, if it is God's will. And God would say, if it is your will, these things will happen. If it is your will. See, it's already God's will for things to happen, whether you're going to be in it or not. But if it is God's will, I will be there. I'm not going to promise you anything that I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm not going to promise you anything that I'm going to do when I leave out of church. I'll say I would love to do a lot of things. I would like to do a lot of things, but I can't make that promise because I don't know if it's in God's plan. And a certain Jew named Apollo, born at Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus. This man was instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in the spirit, he spake and taught diligently the things of the Lord, knowing only the baptism of John. And he began to speak boldly in the synagogue, whom when Aquila and Priscilla had heard, they took him unto them, and expounded unto him the way of God more perfectly. And when he was disposed to pass to Aquila, the brethren wrote, exhorting the disciples to receive him, who when he was come helped them much which had believed through grace. For he mightily convinced the Jews, and that publicly, showing by the scriptures that Jesus was Christ. You know, understand this. What God sends one man to get a point across to, if somebody else don't come behind him with the same message, it wasn't God's plan. It wasn't God's message. Because there's always going to be a confirmation when it is coming from God. God is not going to put it out there and you never see that again. It will never happen. Even the 10 Commandments, I know they stopped living the 10 Commandments after Christ, but it always came back. It always came back up, only because it was a confirmation that that's where we need to be. We're always supposed to be obedient, never disobedient. We're always supposed to love one another, just as Christ loved the church. We're supposed to love, and see, if we learn to live and see, we're still preaching and teaching all of that because we haven't perfected that yet. Right. Now we're still struggling on loving one another. We're still struggling there, and this has been preached and taught from the beginning of time, and yet we as Christians are still jumping down somebody's throats about what they did yesterday, what they did last night, and y'all need to be on the same page as me. I done told y'all that this ain't the way of God. I done told y'all that y'all need to be doing this and need to be doing that. But God is still telling us that we need to love one another. And we hadn't gotten that yet. We're still trying to get them about not living like us, and we're still not loving everybody. And that's been taught years ago. It's been preached and taught in church every day. Coming up in school, it's been taught in school every day. And we still don't get it. We still don't understand the simple fact that people are for people. We're supposed to be for each other. We're not supposed to look at anybody and find a problem with anybody. I know there's going to be a lot of things that we dislike about certain people. There's going to be a lot of things that they do that we're just not in agreement with. But we're never supposed to hate anybody. No, y'all don't do the same thing that I do. God did not create us to do the same things. But God did create us all to love one another. He created us for that. We're not getting that point. Now, we got Apollo here. It says that he was from Alexandria. Now, Alexandria was a place where they was having a lot of teaching. You know, a lot of schooling was going on up there. So, Alexander, as it says, he was an eloquent man. And he knew his word. He knew the scriptures. And he spoke boldly on his scriptures. He talked anytime he said something, he spoke in the tone that made you believe him. Because anytime somebody speak and they don't second guess themselves, you sit here and you're like, I ain't got no other choice but to listen to that, because he's talking like he know what he's talking about. When people are talking like they know what they're talking about, whether it's the truth or not, you're going to take it in. Because they're speaking like it's believable. Now, I'm not saying that what he was saying was not true. Because undoubtedly Priscilla and Aquila, they done said that everything that he was speaking of was the truth. The problem with it was he only knew one half. Right. He only knew one portion of it. And see, that's where they came in at. Like, see, that's why I love Minister Spry and Prophet Spry, because anytime I'm sitting and I'm teaching if they find something that they don't really agree with, they'll be like, hey, let's discuss that after service or something. And we'll go over that. And then we start sharing notes. And they find out where I get mine from. I find out where they get theirs from. And see, now, the information that I started with, now I have information that they got. Because we put our beliefs together. And see, now what I believe in has already grown now, because now I got their version and they got my version. And we're sitting here, okay, I understand where he come from. Yep, and I understand where they come from. I see why they thought that. They say, I see why he thought that. Okay, so now we're sitting here. But see, the thing about that is now I don't just know my side of the story. Now I know theirs too. Like Apollo only knew the portion of John. He only knew that side. That's the only portion he knew. He only knew that side of the story. So while he was out there preaching, he only preached what he knew. And many people can say, well, that's his fault because he didn't go out there and try to learn anything else. Well, he was teaching what he knew. And if what he knew was all he thought he should have known, where is he at fault? See, that's why you got a lot of people, they be asking, well, are they going to hell because they didn't live by the same thing? I don't know. I don't know what he knew. I don't know what truth he knew. I don't know if he even believed or knew who Christ was. Whatever happens to whoever we're talking about, that's between them and God. We can't sit here and tell anybody that they're not right because they're not living the same way that we are living. Because we're living this way because this is our beliefs. Apollo spoke like that because that's what he believed. After Priscilla and Aquila heard him, they took him. They didn't speak out in front of everybody. They took him. And then they told him about everything else. They didn't say, hey, you're wrong. There's more to it than that. Now, you can't be telling people all this stuff like this if you don't know the whole story. They took him. And they explained it to him. And then, the thing about it, believing in God, having faith in God, that's a gift. That's a gift. We get that. But see, you got to have somebody that you can follow each day. You got to have somebody that you can believe in each day. God already gave us that gift to believe in him and have faith. We have faith every day. God already gave us that. To have faith in him. See, this man, he was instructed in the way of the Lord. Like I said, it was a gift to have faith in Christ. But see, now, whether you want to follow Christ, that's a choice. We get that. The gift of faith, we get that automatically. But then you got to choose whether or not you want to follow him or not. And for every choice, remember I say there's consequences behind every choice. Every choice that we make, there's consequences. And whatever we decide to do, we got to understand and know that something is going to be a result of our actions. See, we all want to believe that God can do this and God can do that. The one thing that keeps a lot of us down is the process. That's what keeps a lot of us down, is the process. We know that God can do this and we know that God can do that. Whatever situation we're in, we know that God can bring us out of it. But what we don't like is the process that it takes to come out. I'm tired of being hurt. I'm tired of being broke. I want this and I want that. I want to come up on top. But then when God starts working for us, and we start going through everything that we got to go through, the hard times and the headaches and the pain, the suffering, people spitting on us, people talking junk about us all the time. Now, it's the process that we hate. And God, take this away from me because I don't want it. But you wanted success. Now I'm putting you through everything that it takes to have the success. Now you don't like the process. See, the thing about us is we don't like how God works. We want God to just give us what we ask for, but we don't want God to take us. See, God works like this. If he give it to you, he wants you to be able to hold on to it. And you will never be able to hold on to anything that you've never worked for. If you don't know what it took to get it, keeping it will be a problem. If you know you had to break your back to get that dollar, giving it away is going to be a problem. But if somebody just gave it, here, there goes a dollar, here, there goes another dollar, what you going to end up doing here? Man, I don't care about that. It ain't nothing but a dollar. That's how we're going to treat it. It ain't nothing but a dollar because we don't know what it took to get it. Now, I'm going to tell y'all this here. Don't think hard of me. But I can stand up here and talk all day long. Now, I done told Deke I ain't had a clue what I was going to talk about today. Mm-hmm. Because I had a problem going over this lesson. All week I had a problem going over this lesson. And my wife would tell me, she'd be like, you say that every week. but see, the thing about it is, every week I say that. And every week I surprises myself. Because I don't have a clue what I'm going to say when I stand up here. I get back home and I look over this and I be like, okay. But see, that's the thing about God. The only thing God told us was go, and he'll go with us. Mm-hmm. Open your mouth, and he'll speak for you. There's nothing that we have to do to prepare ourselves for this other than give yourself to God and let God do what he do best. I'm done with my lesson. I'm going to turn this over to the hands of the superintendent.